Energy Board has come out with its list of conditions Kinder Morgan must follow if it hopes to have a chance at tripling the size of its Trans Mountain pipeline. Now, the conditions are extensive. Despite that, though, several interveners in the process dropped out of it today, saying the NEB, rather the National Energy Board, is biased and the process isn't fair. One of the interveners who dropped out today, the Wilderness Committee, Eoin Madden, joins us from the Wilderness Committee, and as well as Alexandra Woodsworth with the Georgia Strait Alliance. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll start with you, Owen. Why did the Wilderness Committee decide to stop being interveners today in this whole process?
Randine, this is a sad day for us. You know, we worked hard to get into these hearings. We advocated for our members and supporters to become part of them. At the time, we were looking at the legal changes by the federal government, and we knew there was a chance it was going to be a very biased hearing. It was going to be a difficult experience for all of us involved, but we still held out hope. Since those days, what we've seen is beyond our worst nightmare. There's been a heavy bias in favour of Kinder Morgan, a failure by the National Energy Board to ensure that the questions asked of them are indeed answered, and we were left today with no choice but to pull out with a number of other interveners and commenters who felt exactly the same way.
Do you think that you will be more effective as opposition than you were within the process?
I believe that the answer to whether or not this pipeline gets built relies on something called social license, and I, like everybody else, is learning about social license and figuring out how it works. We have a very public process going on outside of the National Energy Board and a very closed one within it. The decision over whether this pipeline gets built is a political decision in the end of the day. The draft conditions today will probably be reflected in final conditions in a year's time or in early next year, and will go to a bunch of politicians for them to decide whether the pipeline gets built. So we're going to direct our efforts in making sure that Canadians put the effort into getting their voices heard from their federal representatives. We don't feel that people realise how fundamentally different these hearings are to the Northern Gateway hearings that happened in years gone past, and they need to know that their voices are being stripped from them right now. We live in a far less democratic Canada than we did before 2012, and the federal government made it so.
Alexandra, your group, the Georgia Strait Alliance, shares, I'm guessing, many of the same concerns, if not all of the same concerns as the Wilderness Committee, but you've decided, your group has decided to stay as interveners in the process. Was that a tough decision to make, and do you think you can be more effective within the process?
Well, as you've said, and we do absolutely share many of the same concerns that the Wilderness Committee and so many other interveners and watchers of this process have pointed out. And, you know, we do feel that there is value in all these different strategies. But for us, you know, what we've been able to do by participating, what we hope to be able to continue to do, is bring forward vital evidence that the National Energy Board panel will consider, but also will be used by all kinds of other people, by agencies, by members of the public, to make the case why this project is absolutely not in the public interest. So we do feel that both the participation that we're having, the conditions that we'll be proposing that are far further progressed than the ones that we've seen coming out today, are really important to be on the public record. And as we've seen with Enbridge, a lot of the evidence that went forward during that process has continued to be used in different ways of resistance and opposition, for example, in legal challenges. So we absolutely see value in both procedures. We do see the challenges with this process, and we agree that we deserve better. British Columbians deserve better. And for us, what we'd really like to see is the province strike its own comprehensive process that addresses so many of the flaws around lack of ability to discuss climate, lack of public participation that we've seen with this one. But for now, we're working with what we've been given. We're doing the best we can with what we've been giving, and we're aiming to represent the voices of a lot of people who weren't able to participate in this region. So we're doing our best with what we've been given.
Okay, the big news today, conditions were released by the National Energy Board that Kinder Morgan must follow. Now, these conditions by no means mean that the expansion of the Trans Mountain pipeline is approved. So what do these conditions today actually mean?
Well, I think what they don't do is provide that social license, and that's actually what I'd really like to underscore. You know, what we've seen coming out today can't address the real concerns that British Columbians have. They aren't going to guarantee that we can't have an oil spill. They certainly don't provide for true Aboriginal consent, which doesn't exist on this project, and they obviously aren't addressing a host of concerns that weren't even addressed by the process itself. So, you know, those of us, for example, for Georgia Strait Alliance, these conditions that we're seeing are certainly not going anywhere near far enough, and nor could they, given the process we've been given to to make this project in Canada's best interest. So just want to say that one right off the bat.
Owen, I know, as I said, there are 145 conditions released, and on paper, at least, it looks like it's fairly comprehensive. It goes through a long list of environmental approvals, lots of critters that are species of concern that live in the area. There are questions about firefighting and making sure that they have a safe number of firefighters and an independent body to come and take a look at whether or not they have the ability to protect all of the terminals up on Burnaby Mountain. So on paper, it looks like this is quite an in-depth subject number of conditions to make sure that if this expansion does go ahead, that all of the risks will be mitigated. Did you look at some of these conditions, and do you think any of them matter?
Randine, I did have a quick scan. Obviously, they came out just before I was making my way to the studio. Obviously, they're interesting because they tell you where, in the little bubble that is the National Energy Board, where they think the conversation is at. There's one glaring condition that is not being addressed in those 145 or anywhere in these hearings, and that's a condition that this pipeline does not strip my nieces and nephews, the youth of British Columbia and Canada, of a livable, stable climate. So one of our requests of the British Columbia government right now is that they have a hearing on this and they include a climate test. We need to know, does 100 million tons of climate changing gases every year going up into the atmosphere mean that we're going to get more forest fires, we're going to get a city like Vancouver inundated with rising waters? And from our perspective, from the best science out there, it really does. The only submission we made over the last year or two was a submission in support of the city of Vancouver, and what they said was, hey, National Energy Board, if you're going to look at the bigger, wider picture on how much money this pipeline generates, please look at the cost of the climate change it's going to generate, it's going to drive. The National Energy Board said no. We actually supported the city of Vancouver in that application. There's been a whole host of problems with these hearings, but for us and for me personally, that was the deal breaker. I hope that your audience, the people that see this show, know how much of an impact this pipeline represents for our climate.
All right, well, we're going to have to leave it there. I did want to add, you both mentioned the provincial government. They have chosen not to become interveners in this. I'm guessing they want Kinder Morgan to be subject to those 5 conditions, the same as the Northern Gateway project. Are you hoping, both of you, still that the province will step in? Because I don't think they will.
Well, they are actually interveners in the process. They've chosen not to ask questions and to file evidence early in the process, but they do have an opportunity next month, at the beginning of September, when interveners are all putting forward their final arguments. It's really a summary of what their views are on these projects. So the province has an opportunity to say something quite important in that moment. They also have an opportunity to set out their own conditions, beyond what we've seen today, and to talk about, whether they think this project has or has not met the 5 conditions, which certainly to me, and I'm sure to Owen as well, there's no way this project is meeting the province's 5 conditions, and this moment in September is a very important opportunity, and we really call on the province to use that moment to clarify their position.
Go ahead, Owen.
For me personally, we know that the National Energy Board has power over this decision because of an agreement back in 2010. It's called the Equivalency Agreement, and it was where our own government here in BC handed over the power to Ottawa. It's called the Equivalency Agreement, and it can be withdrawn. You can get out of it after 30 days notice. We're calling on the BC government to do that. If it's going to walk the walk and not just talk the talk, let's have a hearing that looks at those 5 conditions you've mentioned, plus a 6th one, and that is the critical one. Does this pipeline represent climate disruption for decades to come?
All right. Eoin Madden from the Wilderness Committee and Alexander Woodsworth from the Georgia Strait Alliance. Thank you both for your expertise there. When we come back,